Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck, or as you're putting those earbuds and listen to it as you're going along in public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about expenditures of the legal aid funds that are taken from the Western taxpayer pool all across the Western world, and are provided for supposedly worthy legal causes and cases. Now, when legal aid was first introduced, it's for people who couldn't afford legal aid or couldn't afford a lawyer, rather. And so they would go to legal aid, and legal aid would do things like write letters for them and send legal letters out, or if need be, take it even further, go represent people in court and so on. But it was based on not only social need, but as in somebody might be poor, for example, but also based on the merits of the case. Now, the legal merits of the case, the factual merits of the case. So, certainly when I was younger, I was aware of people that would go to legal aid just because they wanted vengeance on their neighbour or something like that, some sort of spurious reason, and the legal aid would just tell them, this is back in the day, no, there's no merit, there's no legal merit to this case, we won't take it up, and we'll maybe write you a letter for you on your behalf, but other than that, we're not going to spend any time or money on this. So, and especially with things like filing fees, and as you get into the higher courts, it can get quite expensive very quickly. So that's how it was then, but things have completely changed now. Legal aid is being spent on cases that have absolutely no legal merit whatsoever. They're purely ideological, delusional fantasy cases. Now, just looking across the Western world, in support of mass migration, legal aid spends vast sums of money. Now, let's suppose, and whether it be Australia or the United States or Britain or wherever, let's suppose there's an illegal alien migrant comes into a Western country. They arrive illegally. They've passed through numerous safe countries, and then they say they want to claim asylum, which they really legally can't do, given they've passed through so many safe countries and have left a refugee camp where they were safe and so on. They're just hustling for going to a rich Western country where they can get freebies and handouts and giveaways and so on. So anyway, their request for asylum's turned down. They no, you're not an asylum seeker, you're not a refugee, don't give us that. But then they're able to, through networks of NGOs, activist legal groups that get funded by legal aid, they're able to mount appeal after appeal after appeal. There's how many cases they lose. There's always one more appeal that can be lodged. And some of these appeals are extremely creative in their construct. And it's not unusual to see, these illegals being able to rack up legal fees of more than $250,000, all paid for out of legal aid. Now, I look at some of these cases and the amount of the court hearings they went into, and the fees are certainly generous in the extreme. So there's these organisations legal groups purport to be assisting the poor downtrodden, black, lesbian, the legal alien. They're certainly not offering budget level fees. They're absolutely charging top dollar, and I don't know how much accounting there is on the amount of hours that they charge either. I don't know is all that accurate. So vast sums of money are being exchanged there from the taxpayer, gouged, I would argue, from the taxpayer. And some of these people in Australia alone, there's quite a number of cases. Again, we're talking about an illiterate third world peasant here, and who is attracting $500,000 of legal aid fees, legal aid expenditures, legal fees, to try and get them to stay in Australia. And now I can't get $500,000 of legal aid, or I don't know any white person who could. So the expenditure is not delivered in any form of merit. Now, in the end, the government, who was also spending money fighting their own, I mean, here's the absurdity: the government has to pay for their own lawyers. They're also paying for the other side's lawyers, who are generously charging and paying themselves generous amounts of money. And so the whole case, just over this one illiterate third world peasant, is more than $1 million. Now, can you find any other case that would attract those sort of expenditures? In the end, the government said, "No, we don't want to spend any more money on this," and just decided not to contest the next appeal. So the guy, this illegal alien third world illiterate peasant, gets to stay in Australia simply because it was no longer contested. He therefore, winning by default, but only after vast sums of money have been disgorged. So when you look at the amount of money that's being spent on by legal aid, it's mostly on those sorts of things: helping illegal aliens fight extradition, helping brown and black criminals fight extradition. The legal aid department doesn't give money to white people who are fighting extradition. It only gives money to brown and black people. So all legal aid is funding nuisance litigation cases of women who claim they've been raped, or LGBTQ people who claim they've been denied access to a men's toilet or something. Those sorts of things that shouldn't be in a court at all, and yet they're aggressively pursued and funded by various branches and groups of legal aid. And you look at things like, say, a separate legal aid budget, which is exclusive just for divorcing, where women who supposedly is for women who have no money, and to try and get some sort of worthwhile outcome for them without having to go to court. But the reality is that the court makes 99% of its decisions in favour of women, unless the woman's a drug addict and out of control. And even then, she'd have to be in a long-term, legally required to be in a long-term drug rehab clinic and straitjackets. Only then would she not win. But the amount of money that's spent on really just shaking down men, it's not a legal case at all. The case has no merit. They're just shaking down. They're just demanding that the man pay, fuckloads of money. And if he says no, it's right, court for you, motherfucker. And he gets dragged through the courts, not because, again, there's any legal merit, just for a shakedown, no other reason. And the government is funding that. Now, the other, the small amount of money that is spent on men, again, is spent on cases that have no real legal merit. For example, here's a man who's in prison for two armed robberies, and he's in prison for for quite a while. I don't know how long, and he manages to get the legal case to court that he is not getting. He doesn't have enough contact with his children, so it gets, and the legal aid pays for all this. Now he ends up getting like a top flight criminal lawyer to argue his case, and they're hauling in all sorts of police officers, and all sorts of people have been dragged into the court to give evidence. And it was interesting. I went in, actually, I saw a bit of that, so I've got first hand on that one. But there are numerous cases like that. So the guy is able to launch a case. He's not getting to see his children enough. Now there's like a meeting place where parents can meet their children or relatives, children in this case. And so he gets to see them once a month for an hour, and he wants to see them once a week. So his ex-wife is obliged to bring. Now he's in a prison quite a distance away from where they live, so it's not like it's an easy task. So but the legal aid is paying for this because he's a victim. I mean, he's oppressed because he's in prison or something. I don't know, but the case has no merit. He's getting to see his children. Why should he simply demand I want more, to see my children more, and you have to do it, and that's it, and then the state can force his ex-wife to do it? And that seems crazy to me. I'm sure he wants to see his children well, but remember that they have to go into a prison to see their father. I don't know how desirable that is, but anyway, that's the situation there. So the money that they do spend on men is also spent on cases that have no merit. Now, I mean, just on the issue of no merit, if an illegal alien comes into the United States and they're given some sort of 90 days to, or whatever the time is, to see an immigration judge, they're given free legal aid to do that. So the government actually pays the illegal alien, gives them a free lawyer to argue that they should be allowed to stay in the United States even though they're illegal or something. I mean, the madness of that is, but that's all paid for by the taxpayer through legal aid. Now, the list goes on of legal aid cases or legal aid expenditures on things. And if you look at sort of a legal aid office in certainly in the more down at heel environments in the US or elsewhere around here, they're stacked with radical activists where the merits of the case are irrelevant. We're fighting back against evil fucking whitey oppression. We're fighting back against the patriarchy. We're fighting back against, and so they view it as a social power struggle of massive proportions and with massive ramifications. And they don't see it as a legal issue at all with merits of a case. Nothing like that. And litigants are encouraged to shake down. No, go after them, and they'll pay you some money. And you see that in Australia as well. And a lot of companies will just go along with the shakedown. Just you can have your money. So it's turned into a gender, race, LGBTQ hustling thing. Same with Black Lives Matter when they're running around, burning buildings down and beating people up, murdering people and so on. If they did get arrested, they got free legal aid. Now, there's a bit of a scam going on here. Sometimes an NGO will step in and will represent the who are like the Black Lives Matter or the illegal alien or whatever it is, will give them legal representation. And they'll always manage to get these, pretty much always manage to get these cases, climate change, but get these cases in front of a very sympathetic judge who's ideologically on board with the whole thing. So they get free, but then the NGO is able to then later on invoice legal aid for the fees. And so it appears that the NGO is paying for because they're given tax-free status. It appears the NGO is putting up the money for these to bail these people out or give them free legal representation, and so on. And so they take those costs or absorb or provide those services, and then later on they invoice legal aid anyway, but that's done quietly in the back room and doesn't appear. So the press or the media can argue, well, no, the NGO was helping it. There really wasn't. The taxpayer was funding that as well. So when you look at legal aid funding now, you need to understand that that it's being directed purely at legal cases that have no legal merit. It's all social justice stuff, ideological nonsense, and race, gender hustling, and so on. And one of the big ways or one of the main ways that this sort of madness can be stopped is that legal aid must focus on cases with legal merit. And the idea that you would hire radical, screaming activists, affirmative action, black lesbian activists to work in legal aid is in itself utterly insane. Same as in the divorce law side of legal aid, stacked to the rafters with gay lesbians and radical lesbian activists that say the family is evil and all men are rapists, Nazis, and so you've got those people deciding which cases that they should take up. In order to return legal aid to its original purpose, which is quite legitimate, to assist the people who can't afford legal representation, but on the basis of their case has merit, then I think that's a good and honourable goal. That was the original intention, and it's what it should be returned to that. Similarly, the NGOs that dabble in this race, gender, hustling, legal activity must lose their tax-free status. and must provide all their services for free if they want to have any sort of legitimacy in this area. They can't then separately invoice legal aid or get backdoor payments from the government and so on, and they have to be taxed on any profits they may make. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.